All right, so we are going to start chapter 6. In chapter 6, we are going to, so this first section is going to be classifying different types of quadrilaterals. So let's remember that a quadrilateral is a polygon with 4 sides. Right, so when we are looking at quadrilaterals, so I'm just going to draw this one here. So 2 sides that are across from one another, those are opposite sides. Right, so they don't touch. So like these two here are opposite sides, and up and down would also be opposite sides of a quadrilateral. Right, so then when you have 2 sides that touch, so it would be like this one and this one, those are what we know as consecutive sides. Right, so again, so we have like these two and these two, they come together and touch, right? So we could even do this one and this one, or this one and this one, this one and this one, right? Any two here would be considered consecutive sides. Right, so these terms are going to come, we need these to understand a lot of these definitions we're getting ready to do. Right, and then also you've got so opposite angles are going to be angles that are across from one another. So like here and here, or here and here. So either the green arrows or the yellow arrows would be considered opposite angles. And then you also have consecutive angles. So like 2 angles that are beside each other. Right, so again, just like consecutive sides, we could also do top left, top right, bottom right, the 2 bottom ones, 2 top ones, any 2 that are right beside each other are consecutive angles. Okay, so now that we understand that, let's go ahead and get in some definitions of specific types of quadrilaterals. All right, so the first definition we have is a parallelogram, and that is a quadrilateral with 2 pairs of parallel opposite sides. All right, so let's draw what that looks like. So typically on these figures, all right, remember when you see these little triangles on here? So that means this pair of opposite sides are parallel, as well as these 2 over here. Please ignore my sad little triangles, right? So you have 1 pair of opposite parallel sides and a second pair of opposite parallel sides. Okay, and next we have a rectangle, which is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. All right, so it is a parallelogram, so that means that this is also true. So it has 2 pairs of parallel opposite sides, and it also has right angles. Right, so remember, right angles are 90-degree angles. And remember that this pair of sides is parallel, and this pair of sides is also parallel for a rectangle. Okay, and then next we have a rhombus, which is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Right, so a rhombus is kind of like a diamond shape, but all 4 sides are the same length. Right, and they don't necessarily have right angles. That almost looks more like a square. Right, so again, they're all parallel, but all of the sides are congruent to each other, which means they're the same length. Then next we have a square, which has 2 definitions technically. It's a rectangle with 4 congruent sides, or it's a rhombus with 4 congruent angles. So we'll put both of those up. And I believe you all are fairly familiar with a square. All right, so it's got our congruent sides here. And our right angles. All right, and then we have two more that aren't related to a parallelogram. All right, so our last two, we have a kite. So I'm going to draw the kite over here. It's a quadrilateral with two pairs of congruent consecutive sides. So remember, consecutive means that they're beside each other. So like this side and this side are going to be congruent. And then we have two other sides that are consecutive that will be congruent to each other. All right, so remember that the one line means that those two parts are congruent to each other, and then these two mean that these two parts are congruent to each other. And then lastly, we have a trapezoid, which is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel opposite sides. So it can look a lot of times like this, where the top and bottom here are parallel. And it doesn't always have to be top and bottom. You could draw it sideways too. But then sometimes we have what we call more specifically an isosceles trapezoid, where it looks more kind of like that. So, several ways you can draw them, but they only have one pair of parallel opposite sides. Because if it has two, then it would be a quadrilateral. All right, and a few other things we should know about quadrilaterals is that the sum of the interior angle measures, so all the measures of the angles inside the quadrilateral, will add up to 360. Okay, and that is really all the information you should need to complete the assignment for today, which is page 252, questions 1 through 13. So 1 through 5, you're just looking at the pictures and naming opposite sides, opposite angles, consecutive sides, consecutive angles. And number 5, it's asking about bases and legs. And it is a trapezoid, so it looks kind of like this. Bases are going to be top and bottom. And then these two green parts would be the legs. Right, so name those with their segment lengths, the segment names. And then on 6 through 13, you're given some letters. So like A is kite, B parallelogram, C rectangle, D rhombus, E square, F trapezoid. So for those, you're looking at the picture and you're stating each letter that so each figure whose definition works for that. So like looking at number 6, we could say it's a parallelogram, right? But 7, we could say lots of different things, right? So it's a parallelogram, but it has right angles, so it's also a rectangle. But all the sides are congruent, so it's a rhombus and a square. So like, give me B, C, D, and E, right? So give me all the letters that work. So I just did 2 of those with you, right? So state all the letters that work. We will go over this when we are back together in class, hopefully tomorrow. Or at the time I'm making this video, I don't even know that we're going to need it. We might be at school tomorrow. So we'll see what happens.